We're engineers by training. We don't have a
Yeah.
background in employee benefits or dental or insurance at all. But we started looking at this problem because we have a handful of family members who are in dentistry. And when we started examining and getting under the hood, we saw all these beliefs, these conventions, these convictions that the market has and how the market describes itself as opportunities. Well, does dental insurance need to be commoditized? Do the networks need to be all the same as each other? Does the 180/50 plan design need to be the standard? Is there a way to change the status quo? And that became really Beam's true north. Hey, I'm Fro, and this is the future of insurance.
This episode is brought to you by Medallia, the market leader in customer and employee experience. Their award-winning SaaS platform, Medallia Experience Cloud, makes all your other applications customer and employee aware. Medallia uses proprietary AI and machine learning to reveal predictive insights that drive powerful business actions and outcomes. Leading insurers like the Hartford and Farmers use Medallia to reduce churn, turn detractors into promoters, create in-the-moment cross-sell and upsell opportunities, and drive revenue-impacting business decisions. Learn more at Medallia.com. And the Future of Insurance book series, available exclusively from Amazon or at future-of-insurance.com. Fro, thanks for joining me for an episode of the show, and thank you for being in the book as well.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, and great to meet in person, kind of.
Yeah,
but good to see you. Yeah.
We'll get as close virtually as we possibly can. And for people listening, you go by Alex Frommeyer, and we just recorded the intro, and now I got to figure out how formal do we go with your name. So it's TBD. We'll see which one. People have heard it by now, so they'll know what we settled on.
We decided that based on how the conversation goes, it'll be clear what the right signature should be.
That's right. Yeah. If it feels like we're not friends at the end, then you'll be Alex, and
Alex
otherwise,
Frommeyer. Yes.
Yeah. Fro, give us a little feel for what Beam Dental is and how you got here.
So Beam Dental is the industry's first and only digitally native dental insurance company. So similar to the general trend of what's happening in insurtech or just to the insurance markets in general, it's being picked apart the way the internet has kind of picked apart a newspaper into all these discrete services and products now. The same thing's happening to insurance, coverage type by coverage type. And Beam thinks of itself as the future of dental insurance specifically, and the company that is set to reshape how dental insurance works from soup to nuts. And we started this mission back in 2012. Really around just a piece of the business today, which is a dental wellness program built around the Beam Brush, a connected electric toothbrush. Yeah. And so we were happy to dive in deep on that. But over the years, we've evolved to actually go into insurance, not as a vendor, but as a carrier. And we now are sitting in this really interesting position as a business, rapidly growing about double per year. Our book of business is growing really rapidly, and we're now sinking our teeth fully into not even just dental insurance anymore, but really the even broader topic of what's the future of employee benefits. Yeah. And employee benefits is actually opening us up to a world where it's not even just about our expertise in dental insurance. It's really about how to deliver a program to employers of all sizes that help attract and retain talent, that help employers better manage their workforce and kind of issues related to it. Think about what COVID's done to change that equation just in the past year. And we are taking our specific experience and expertise around how to deliver a best-in-class dental insurance solution as really the tip of the spear for that entire discussion. So when I think about how Beam articulates itself today, our value proposition indexes along three core elements: easy, smart, and preventive. And easy will resonate with, I think, a lot of the work that you've been doing and researching about broadly across insurance. It's what happens when companies are built in the relatively recent past and are built on an inherently natively digital chassis. So from day one, the databases are unified, the platform is a singular experience, and modern tools, technology, and talent are contributing to a platform that allows for more automation, more streamlined services, more straightforward product design and plan features, and a more delightful user experience, whether that's quoting or enrollments or claims processing or customer support or billing and invoicing. All these topics about delivering a great insurance experience can be thought of differently. This is a transformation that's also happening inside of big established legacy carriers as well. It's just 10x harder because the platform has been built in at totally different eras with different technologies and different approaches. And so it's a challenge that InsurTech has a real meaningful moat or advantage on from the legacy carriers. Insurance is not the only market where that's playing out, but it is a good example of one.
Yeah.
And then just to quickly hit on Beam's other two core elements, beyond easy, it's about smart and preventive. Smart is our approach to underwriting. We've blended traditional actuarial techniques with some of the emerging data science and machine learning techniques to be able to price risk on a more specific basis. So when we get an RFP, it's usually for an employer, and we want to be able to actually come up with a view on what we think the claims consumption is going to be on that group in the coming plan year.
Mm-hmm.
So who's going to go to the dentist, how often, and what are they going to order when they go? Yeah. And we're using predictive analytics and machine learning techniques to actually make that guess. And that guess is informed by, again, a more traditional actuarial view and calculation combined with some of these predictive qualities we have built into our data sets. And this is allowing us to offer more customized rates to employers, regardless of their size, and helping to smooth out the volatility that exists, especially with smaller employers whose needs change from year to year. Yeah. And we're getting so good at this these days in a broader set of geographies and a broader set of employers, that we are gaining massive confidence that we have really cracked the nut on understanding groups better than they understand themselves, which allows us to design programs that either don't exist in the industry or they are only lightly deployed because of the lack of telemetry that other carriers have versus Beam. And then the third piece of the puzzle is preventive. This is probably the most visible part of our business. It's also, as I mentioned earlier, how we started Beam. The Beam Toothbrush is the first connected electric toothbrush, and we wrapped it up inside what we think of as the industry's first and only dental wellness program. So there's toothpaste, there's replacement heads for the brush, there's floss, there's other oral care goods. And we make this a voluntary program available to any of our members. So when they're enrolling in their experience and just kind of kicking things off with Beam, they get the brush and then they get replacement heads, et cetera, over time. But the whole point of the program is to actually give our members credit for taking care of their teeth. Exactly similar to telematics in auto insurance, which is giving people credit for being a good driver, or in wellness companies, which are like my friends over at Aetna got me this Apple Watch.
Yeah, the Attain program. Yeah.
So that's the Attain program, Vitality. There's a bunch, everybody has a program now, but everything's based on the same idea, which is give people credit for taking especially preventive actions. So if I'm a responsible driver, I'm taking preventive actions. If I'm a healthy, if I'm trying to get my diet and my exercise right, I'm taking preventive actions. And if I'm brushing my teeth every day, I'm also taking preventive actions. So Beam gives you both the physical tools to essentially prove or ask for credit for taking great care of your teeth every day. And then it's Beam's job to connect that to rewards and a better insurance product, better coverage, lower price, et cetera, to reward our users for their habit forming and then that consistency over time.
So my head's spinning, not in a bad way, but there's a lot of things I want to dig into. And kind of before we get deeper on some of the specifics of how things have been going, because Beam's a bit unique in terms of the startup carrier space, where oftentimes the loss ratios are really bad, which is normal. Even an existing carrier, you start in a new line of business or like a small book is going to have bad losses. And while it's growing rapidly, that's going to continue. You guys have actually bucked the trend, and your thesis around, or your theory around having the data, using that in underwriting, driving behavioral change, and the virtuous cycle is yielding better loss ratios.
so I'm curious about getting into that, but there's something I want to get to before that. And the joke in the industry is like people say they work in insurance and then they kind of make a crack about how uncool that is or boring, or like, so people don't like me at dinner parties. And then hearing what I've heard from you for the book, but in past interviews about dental, and then I stopped and really thought about it. And it's like dental is almost a dental insurance person at an insurance cocktail party would be the one who, like, no one wants to talk to them, just like the regular insurance people. The joke goes, no one wants to talk to them at a regular people dinner party. It's like dental is like no one even cares about it. It's the people providing it generally don't care about it. It's not a money maker. It's like a loss leader, or not even leader. It's like you have to bring it along in your group offering because you need a well-rounded package, whether you're a broker or an insurer. If you want to get that account, you have to round it out. And at the same time, like, employers don't really care about it generally, historically. They just needed to offer it too, because they didn't want to lose someone because they didn't offer it. But no one's picking their job because the dental's $3 less with this job per month than it is over here, or the copay is a little bit. Like, it just didn't seem to register on anybody's radar. And then you guys are like, we're going to go after dental. And like, and there's a whole part of your story around that, but it was fascinating to me how neglected it was. Really, like, no one was trying here, and you guys had this brilliant idea, and the industry was just sort of like, there's nothing you can do about dental. It just kind of comes along for the ride, and it's terrible, and move on. And then you guys went to solve it yourself. So I'd love to hear some thoughts about that. And that's what led you from just having this smart toothbrush to actually trying to offer the coverage. But then how do you even break into the space? And if brokers aren't necessarily interested in it either, there's so much to the story around that I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, you're so much in there. And I think when I think of Beam building the future of dental insurance, one of the things I mean by that is making it relevant to a degree.
Yeah.
And which is kind of weird to say, because we're talking about an $80 billion market.
Yeah.
It's not like dental insurance is brand new and still finding its voice. It exists, and it very much exists to the tune that it is, by most market standards, a very large market.
Yeah.
But in the insurance world, you're right. It's a small market, and it's a little brother product at most of our competitors. And it is, classically thought of as an also ran, a bundleable product with the health line, or, part of a big broad menu of employee benefits products being offered. And so, one of our goals, and then it's classically thought of as commoditized as well.
Yeah.
Everybody's offering the same actuarial models. We actually know the guy. There's like literally one guy who is responsible for, probably 75% of all the actuarial models in dental in use today.
Yeah.
It all comes from one guy and basically his techniques and methodologies, et cetera. So when I say it's commoditized, there's literally like one guy that drives most of the standard for, or the status quo for, how insurance is priced in our market. And so everybody's using the literal same models to price the risk. Everybody's got the same SLAs in their customer support and service departments. There's very little technology differentiation from carrier to carrier. Everybody's network these days is about the same size and strength. There's some exceptions to that, but network's becoming more, kind of broadly commoditized. And so, you wake up one day, and this is, I think, the kind of shadow in which Beam started tackling this problem in this market. You wake up one day and dental insurance just looks like the same thing, regardless of major health insurance company, major life insurance company, maybe a dental specialist here or there, a Delta Dental, right? It looks like kind of the same thing with just a different logo on it. And so brokers got in the habit of just spreadsheeting a few dental options. You talk about it in the final 2 or 3 minutes of the hour-long meeting you have with your client. You spent the first 57 minutes on health insurance, right? Yeah. And then you get to the very end of the meeting and you're like, hey, by the way, do you guys want dental insurance? And then somebody's like, yeah, sure, throw it in there. And that's how dental insurance works And that's still unfortunately somewhat true today. But Beam's, I don't articulate it this way to our team, but one of Beam's goals for sure, and what success looks like for us, is simply making dental matter in that equation. I want more of that hour dedicated to Beam. I want dental to have more shine as a highly desired, highly valued employee benefit, which it is. It's number 2 to health insurance. It's the second most popular, second most desired employee benefit. It is a market that still is missing about 100 million Americans. And just to emphasize that again, there are close to 100 million people in the United States that do not have dental coverage today, which means when they go to the dentist, they're paying full price.
Yeah, that's like 30% of the country.
It's about 30% of the country.
Huge population.
And luckily there's been some meaningful Medicaid expansion over the past decade or so, which has started to eat into that kind of uncovered population, which is great from a public health perspective. But there is still a huge missing part of the market that isn't participating. And then even folks that do have coverage, a unfortunately large percentage of it isn't great coverage.
Yeah.
And everybody, I've been hearing these stories. Once people find out that I'm running a dental insurance company, they very, very eagerly tell me about how terrible their dental insurance plan is at their employer. And, so you hear it all the time about how, why isn't this covered? Why isn't that covered? Why am I artificially capped at an annual maximum each year? Why can't I do this? Why can't I do that? And so you start to get into all these complexities around the product, how it's designed, but those are all opportunities. And so when I started looking at this market, which was largely because with my two co-founders, we're engineers by training. We don't have a background in employee benefits or dental or insurance at all. But we started looking at this problem because we have a handful of family members who are in dentistry. My sister's a dentist. She married a dentist. One of the other co-founders, his mom is a dental hygienist. And when we started examining and getting under the hood in the dental industry and specifically dental insurance, we saw all these beliefs, these conventions, these convictions that the market has and how the market describes itself as opportunities. Well, does dental insurance need to be commoditized? Do the networks need to be all the same as each other? Does the 180/50 plan design need to be the standard? Do actuaries need to run away kicking and screaming from dental? Like anybody that starts as a dental actuary gets out of it as fast as they can because they are basically undervalued working for other carriers in that market. Is there a way to change the status quo? And that became really Beam's true north, starting with the connected toothbrush. We viewed that as a way to bring new underwriting data about preventative care habits into the actuarial models. We viewed that as a way to use a consumer product to create a new marketing scheme, a way to use a consumer experience as an entree to invite people into owning or having dental insurance, as opposed to going uninsured, and using that efficacy prevention tool to get there. And then it morphed and it evolved and it pivoted over time, because essentially what happened is our IoT hardware solution coming in as total outsiders in the dental insurance industry, when we walked into some of the big name carriers proudly displaying a new tool, a new data opportunity, a new underwriting method, a retention booster, a differentiator. The response was, man, didn't you hear? Didn't you get the memo? Dental insurance is commoditized. It's over. There's only one thing to do, which is go to war on price. And if you can help me lower my prices, I'm all ears. And that's what we heard from the market. If you can help me lower prices, fine, we'll pay attention. Other than that, don't give me anything about user experience. What are you even talking about? Don't tell me about differentiated underwriting data. Didn't you get the memo? Dental solved. It's over.
Yeah.
And we heard all of that. First reaction was, oh my God, I think our burgeoning startup is about ready to go out of business. And then I think the second thing I heard upon more reflection is, these are the opportunities that Beam should be actually leaning into instead of leaning away from.
Yeah. I feel like as engineers, it had to end up there. Like engineers don't typically get told no, or that's impossible, or give up. That usually just sparks more like, how else can we solve this? So just
It's
a
exactly it.
different structure to your mindset on it.
Yeah, and I think that was, I think there are a lot of industries where um, it's a kind of tale as old as time, or like a really classic argument. What's better, ignorance to how hard these problems are to solve? I think healthcare gets a lot of this. Do you want outsiders who know actually nothing about how healthcare is delivered because they just don't actually understand how hard it is? So they'll end up accomplishing all this
Yeah.
stuff that they actually don't deserve to because they were ignorant the whole time. And then they're like, wow, this is actually really hard. But then at that point, they're too deep in, so they just keep going.
Yeah.
Or is it better to have just, incredible expertise, subject matter expertise in order to best solve a problem? And I think it's a really interesting debate. Our N of one answer to that in the dental industry is that we came in as total novices, outsiders, and I couldn't have told you anything about dental insurance the day I decided to start a dental insurance company. And so it's been a learning journey, and we've definitely made mistakes as a result of that ignorance. And we've actually worked really hard to get a larger percentage of our employees at Beam with some industry experience, because we've seen some of those weaknesses, and I think we've strategically addressed them over time. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think it was a huge leg up for us to not know that much about the industry we were getting into, because not only did it create the perseverance, but it gave us that, via probably the engineering mindset, an ability to just pick the problem apart to a level that most of our competitors either didn't want to, or could easily have spent that same effort on the big brother products inside their businesses, whether that was health insurance or life insurance or disability or other voluntary lines. And so I think, as others have concluded, they gave up early, right? There's nothing to do in dental, move on. And we just kept picking it apart bit by bit until we saw the opportunities that we now leverage today as some of Beam's core value proposition.
Yeah. It's super interesting to me. There's so many things about dental and about the toothbrush. Like I remember you were talking about it in the Coverager podcast with Nick, that it was like, it's this universal, it's the most universal healthcare implementer tool, and people generally don't need to be taught how to use it. They just know, or they've learned so long ago they don't remember learning it. More so even than a bicycle, right? How to ride a bike. And so it's like your ability versus, like, not that a Fitbit is complicated, but it's not something anyone would have known about otherwise. And so you have to know, like, creating your account and syncing and all that. Like, people know how to brush their teeth. They've been brushing their teeth. They're probably doing it anyway. So this isn't really a new behavior. It's like jumping onto something they're already doing. As you think about how that's allowed you to change a space that wasn't changing and frankly needed to, because as much as it was commoditized and solved, it wasn't, because it wasn't working for everyone. Financially, it wasn't great for the carriers. Like, you can't say it's solved if it's kind of not working all that well all around. So, to me, huge problem that still needed addressing. As you look at some of the other lines and other spaces around you, and you think about that, your ability to move the group space or the benefit space to one that performs better for everyone. Do you see that? Do you see analogs around you, or is dental sort of unique in that respect because of the simplicity of the tool?
Yeah, we absolutely see other opportunities like it. Just to put, and it's a great memory, that podcast was really fun to do. Just to put a fine point on it, I've never seen anything as elegant as the toothbrush, and I think I've been accused of everything at this point related to, being the guy that invented a connected toothbrush. Oh my God, what's next? Like, have we IoT'd ourselves to death here? I never saw it that way. We, especially early on, I think a certain percentage of the tech world, and certainly the insurance world, dismissed us as, kind of like frivolous, or solution searching for a problem. I always saw the opportunity to be that there's arguably no other more common human behavior on planet Earth that shares a a tool. Like everybody eats, for
Yeah.
example, but where you source your food from and the food itself is grown and consumed in a relatively small geography. And so there are all these closed ecosystems. A toothbrush being manufacturable and repeatable can be stamped out on a global basis, theoretically.
Yeah.
And so I always found it weird that people really seem to intuitively understand like the network of mobile phones, for example. Stamp out a bunch of iPhones and it creates this big network, mesh network of users. And the more people that are on Facebook creates the network effect that means everybody else needs to be on Facebook.
Yeah.
And things can grow quickly. And so from a health care perspective, I never understood why it wasn't more obvious to more folks that toothbrushing was like arguably the easiest thing to create a mesh network out of on a global basis, if that was the goal. And that was never specifically our goal, but we figured that usage of the brush yielding data in and of itself would be interesting for the telemetry needed to optimize oral care routines for the long-term dental health of the people themselves, right? So that's just like coaching or feedback. And that's how a lot of other connected toothbrush programs work today, which is just help you brush better, higher quality, more consistency, reminders, coaching, feedback, that type of thing. But if you think about wearables, the reason why these have worked when Google Glass failed and we're still trying to figure out, headsets and a lot of other IoT projects haven't taken off is that wearing watches is such a common human behavior. So asking people to wear a smart watch was only incrementally more advanced than asking people to wear a watch. A very well understood and established market. And we saw the same thing with the brush. When we think about other lines of coverage and other employee benefits, we certainly see some hardware and IoT potential inside of some of those product lines. What we see consistently, though, for sure, is an opportunity to create that easy feeling and experience for stakeholders ranging from the consumer of that insurance to the buyer of that insurance, which is usually the employer, to the distributor of those products, which is typically a benefits broker. And the future of these markets will look largely like a big digital transformation where the experience becomes what everyone begins to look for instead of just price. And then if you can create differentiation in how that experience clicks into behaviors, habits, or new measurements, that's going to be done on a line by line basis. I think about home insurance as being a great example. You can clearly see the opportunity to get homes and condos rigged up with sensors and intelligence over time, where the home insurance product will become an experience where so much passive data will be streaming from a home that it'll create a lower premium driven by the intelligence to understand how weather could impact the home from the outside, leaks and fires from the inside, and all those other hazards that exist will eventually all be connected and sensorified across that physical domain. And I think it's a really exciting time because we're seeing some of the early signals of it. And I think we'll see more in the future.
I think that's a good point. And the context for each of those insured spaces and what sensors and what tools you need to not just monitor what's going on, but effectively deploy risk management really is what you're talking about, is like reducing the exposure for that same life or property or whatever, so that the net result is better experience, better underwriting, better rates, customers happier. Gets back to the whole like yeah, people may not have a claim, which means they don't get the value of their insurance, but wouldn't you rather not have a claim than have a tree fall through your house, or, bang your car up, or lose your teeth, right? Like, these are all like, oh, and thank God I've been paying all the premium. And so like the insurer had to step in and pay for it. Like, well, I'd still rather have my teeth and pay the premium for nothing. So like, maybe I'm weird, but um, you guys, I mean, it's interesting. Like, so I don't have a Beam toothbrush, but I do have a connected smart toothbrush. Not that I've ever turned on the connected features of it. I think my toothbrush has Bluetooth. I don't know. I don't necessarily care because there's no reason for me to use it. There's no there's no back end benefit to it. Other than, I guess, it could tell me if I'm brushing well enough or not. But um, I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about like Quip, electric toothbrush, cheaper price, but like subscription. They send you the brush heads, they send you the toothpaste, all that stuff didn't exist when you guys did that.
Right.
So, now basically after a certain level, all the electric toothbrushes have some sort of connected feature to them. There are subscription oral care solutions out there, but you guys, none of that was there in 2012. So it was really interesting to me that, there's this whole insurance story, but there's also like this basic subscription economy story to it. And yeah, IoT as well, which I know feeds into the insurance story, but you guys were actually pioneering on a few fronts that now I think a lot of us might just take for granted, because we've got our Netflix subscription and our Amazon subscribe and save or whatever, like stuff just shows up, but that wasn't happening back then at all.
Yeah, it's a good point. And when you go back to the early days of Beam, which were right around 2012, the companies that I admired most at the time or thought were these like really interesting, that they represented these really interesting macro trends happening, were Fitbit, which is in its early stages as a business and really the pioneer of wearables. Nest, an IoT pioneer. Dollar Shave Club, a subscription pioneer.
Yeah.
And Oscar, which had just gotten started, and it was probably the first company where I was like, what's interesting? That company's interesting. They are taking a digitally native approach to insurance.
Yeah.
And it was right around that time. And so if you put those four companies into a cauldron and mix it up and sprinkle dental in there, that's essentially Beam.
Yeah.
And I think what we were so fascinated by, just from a first principles perspective, was what if this subscription thing and this IoT thing and this it was called the quantified self movement, but Fitbits were often leveraged by folks at the time that were really into fitness or just quantifying things about their body, their blood pressure, and they were taking their weight down. And so they used to use spreadsheets and they were tracking the trends of how their weight or blood ox or whatever were moving over time. A lot of them had chronic diseases, and that's how they managed some of their care. But the quantified self movement was really home base at the time for a lot of the nerds that were trying to build hardware to quantify new things. And so we kind of were early participants in that world as well. And so we're like, what if all these things are actually a lot more similar than we're giving them credit for? And that's essentially what Beam's business model was born out of.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And of course, now I'm thinking back to like, I had the Jawbone Up, the original one.
Yeah, me too. I owned one.
And then I had a Nike Fuel Band, and and I still rock a spreadsheet, by the way. I'm still like putting everything as I keep it old school at the same time.
Love it.
Yeah. And now I just got to think about like, I'm not recording anything about my mouth. Maybe I should. And I'm going to the dentist on Monday. So this is all front and center.
Oh, this is top of mind. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating. And I keep coming back to this, like this extreme position of how dental just was like given up on. And that's not good enough. And you've proven that it's not just like, here's people from the outside who don't get it. And that's why like, yeah, they think, but truth is a few years on, waste of money, like all that VC money went nowhere. But actually like, I put this in the case, your loss ratios, and I don't know if that's the correct term in dental. I know medical it's talking about differently, but you're better than industry average. And there are startups who claim that, and being of the industry, I'm like, no, they're like 15 points higher than what would be an acceptable loss ratio. But you guys are actually coming in below that, which to me is proof that either you've completely like selected insureds who just never use their dental coverage, which I highly doubt, because you have a big enough population that would have already bitten you if that's what you were doing. Either you'd stop growing, or eventually you get around to people who actually need oral care and are going to spend on it. Or more likely, in fact, the theory is true that if you're watching what's going on, you can change the behaviors and the space you're in. It's not like getting someone who's 400 pounds and heavy smoker and drinker and, eating all the wrong things at risk of diabetes and a heart attack to change all of those habits. These are people who are already brushing their teeth. And so it's like, oh, if you brush for 10 more seconds, like you're almost there. And here's what we see happening to your trends over time. If you did that, that's a much easier behavior change than, all the other, when we think about the healthcare kind of behavior changes that are often needed from an intervention standpoint to stave off the big surgeries and the big expenses later. You can affect change much more directly in oral care. I think it's fascinating to me. I wish that there was an analog for that on P&C. Maybe it just hasn't been discovered yet. Maybe it's the homeowner stuff, so we can see things before the house burns down. Like, are there signs, and with the right sensors, could we get there?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And, I have always really liked dental insurance as a category because of exactly what you talk about. It's a very, it's a lower severity, higher predictability line of insurance. It has a much shorter tail than most of the big, highly visible lines of coverage. And it has a much more direct relationship between preventative care and then the outcome, the health outcome sitting on the other side of it. One of the things that people get messed up with dental insurance is that it's not pure insurance in the sense that it's covering cat risk. And so you're either going to file 0 claims on your home policy, and then one day your house burns down and you file a total loss claim, right? So it's kind of a very binary outcome between the two. Dental insurance has a component that is insurance, which I would just broadly define as protection against an unforeseen event. So like, I didn't know I needed a root canal. You might find this out next week when you go to the dentist.
Everything's going to be good. That's not, my house is suffering a loss right now. So I'm not, we're not doing this in my mouth too. It's all going to be good.
So, that is an unforeseen event. And so that is pure insurance. But part of a dental insurance policy is meant to be consumed. So I would call it a benefit. So it's part benefit, part insurance.
Right.
And so the benefit would be like getting a cleaning, a checkup with the dentist every 6 months. You go get a cleaning, you get some x-rays, you get an oral exam, maybe an oral cancer screening. And so, one of the challenges for us early on is just picking the thing apart to actually understand, where is consumption a good thing or easy to price into the policy because it's valued? People who want to get that checkup are going to value having coverage so they can get that checkup for free. And so they're willing to pay for it. Versus where are the areas where there's actually premium at risk? And then how can we better understand that risk and predict when it's going to happen and how it's going to happen? And so what we've been able to do via our underwriting methodology, and then of course also the brush data and the wellness program investment that we make in our members, the combination of those two things has allowed Beam to achieve, I think, what I would call our most impressive achievement as a business, or the thing I'm most proud of at Beam from an achievement perspective, which is, as we've grown really quickly as a book of business, we're about doubling our book every year. We have actually been able to simultaneously lower our aggregate loss ratio.
Yeah.
And this well from your study of the industry in a broad sense, no one would agree that that's possible or certainly easily achievable. And I think we have worked really hard to make that true for sure. But it really is suggestive of a truly different approach because of the difficulty and the understanding classically that the faster you grow, the more early contracts you have, that's more adverse selection in the book. That's more difficult usage. That's accidental mispricing that can't get repriced until renewal periods. So every other line of coverage, and then all of our competitors in dental commonly understand that the faster you grow and the higher your percentage of new contracts are, or new policies, that is going to give you the most volatile loss ratio results.
Yeah.
And then as your book ages and seasons, and you're on some customer's 23rd straight contract period, you've got the pricing at that point dialed in. You know how to renew them. You know how to manage the risk, et cetera, et cetera. And so Beam has been able to, I think, achieve something really spectacular, which is create value. So the customer is seeing the opportunity to purchase a Beam policy instead of a legacy insurer policy. They're choosing Beam because they value the differentiation, the unique experience that they'll get as a Beam member. And then we're inviting members into our book of business that exude risk characteristics and have a prevention behavior characteristic that we can combine to create a really healthy book of business and a really top-notch performing book of business, even despite that fast growth and all of the adverse selection and other factors at play in those early contract periods.
Fro, I could honestly, I keep talking to you for hours, and I would feel bad for you, but it would be interesting for me. This has been great, and the thing is, we're just scratching the surface. So people should look into you more. They should go back and listen to that Covered Your Podcast episode, because I still remember it a year and change later, and they should pick up the book, because the story that you guys shared really openly about it. And we get into the house that you and your friends had with engineering work and engineering school work going on, and pizza deliveries. It's a proper startup kind of scene story. I loved it. But we get into all that. So thank you for this conversation, but for all that you gave to bring that story to light. It's great. It was really, really insightful.
It's so much fun to be a contributor of our story to the bigger story that you're crafting. So I appreciate you doing it. And, I think the opportunity to take this moment in time and really memorialize it, because of everything I think is going to happen over the next decade or two in insurance broadly, and certainly in our world, and continuing to work on achieving Beam's mission and vision as a business. It's so fun. I appreciate deeply the effort, and we got to do this again soon so we can continue to click in deeper on all the little threads that are contained inside our work in dental, but also what's happening broadly in the industry.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. Fro, and we're going with Fro, or I got to go with Alex.
Yeah, did we earn
I think we both earned the Fro, but we'll have to leave it to the listeners. They can leave a comment. Thank you so much for the time.
Thanks, man. We'll talk soon.
Thank you to Fro for coming on the show. And we're all friends with him now, right? No one needs to call him Alex. We can all call him Fro. All he had to do was listen. But it's a great conversation. It's really interesting what they're doing. And to me, a huge part of that is just breaking through this whole indifference kind of barrier that existed in dental to create something different and something that is resonating. And frankly, I talked about it with him in the show, but their results, it's quite unique at their age and scale as a company and speed of growth, like Fro was saying, to get the results that they're getting, to get the underwriting results. It's very, very unique. So I think that's a great reminder and push that when you see a startup that maybe their numbers don't look so great and they explain it away or they hype it away, does it have to be that way? No, I think Beam is a great example that maybe they're just not solving the problem the way that they could.
So, very interesting. And of course, like Beam has some things at their disposal that you may not have in other lines. Like, what's the toothbrush equivalent, and all the data and behavior change that can come with it in other spaces. Maybe there is one, maybe there isn't. Maybe there's things they're doing in their underwriting and their use of that data that could be extensible to other places. So I think it's a great case to take some inspiration from, but be wary to not just explain it away because, oh, they're just in dental and, XYZ is different in dental. Don't swear it off. Take those learnings in, because there is something in that story. And speaking of the story, of course, we get much deeper into not just Beam, but its predecessor, Uproar Labs, which was Fro and his two friends, the co-founders who started Beam, how they even came to getting into this position of starting a dental insurer in the first place. It goes way back. And yes, it does have this very .com startup feel to it, in this house that they rented together where they had people doing their homework, not the founders' homework, their own homework, but also working on these engineering consulting kind of engagements or projects that the founders had put together or had found in the local business community as they built this business that started off as Uproar and eventually evolved into Beam. It's just a cool kind of founding journey that I don't think you get to have often in insurance, because there's this hardware component to the story and it's so critical to what they're doing. So you can pick up The Future of Insurance From Disruption to Evolution, Volume 2, The Startups, featuring Beam and other great startup insurers or MGAs, and hear their story, the ups and downs, the moments that were really difficult that maybe put the company's survival on the line, and the moments of great success and thriving and insight and maybe interesting pivots that opened up totally new doors. They're just rich stories. I took so much from writing it. I've really found myself enjoying the journeys that these founders and their companies went on, and I'm just excited to share that with you. So check it out. You can get it exclusively from Amazon or directly from me. You can search whatever geography you're in, your country, that local Amazon. Just search for The Future of Insurance, or you can search for my name. You'll find it either way. Or you can go to future-of-insurance.com and you can get Volume 2 or Volume 1. You can pick up both books. You can even get them together in a joint Future of Insurance party pack, and I'm sure I will have a much better name for it, but you can get both books. I will personally sign them and ship them directly to you, and I'm excited to be able to share all of these great case stories across both books, legacy and startup carriers, because there's so much for us all to gain. So thank you to Fro and for all his peers across all the companies that were part of the book, and to Fro for joining me today, and to the team at Beam who's been really, really helpful in getting this all put together. Also, a thank you to Medallia for making this episode possible. So definitely check them out at medallia.com. And just a reminder, please subscribe so you never miss another episode. I've got most of the companies that are in the book. I've got their founders on for a show, plus people from lots of other carriers, all senior folks, executives sharing the thoughts that you want to hear and talking pretty real about what's going on in the industry, and some thought leaders from across different pockets of the industry, geographies, themes. If you subscribe, you will never miss any of them. So make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. And if you're checking out the show notes page at future-of-insurance.com/podcast, click into any of the episodes, and down towards the bottom, there's links to pretty much all the major podcast platforms. But if you don't see a link, just check the one you like. I hear it from people all the time. They're like, oh, are you on this platform? Never mind, I found it. So yes, it's in pretty much everywhere where you would consume a podcast. So you can check it out, share it with a friend, leave a review. All that is good stuff. All right, thanks everyone. And I will be back next time with more insights and inspiration for you.